FD Freedare Saiga. And this bike has some pretty unique features, especially when it comes to safety and making sure your bike doesn't get stolen. But as you guys can see, it is a pretty large bike. So now let's take a look at it. Let's talk about some of the features this Saiga has to offer. One of the first things that sets this bike apart from the rest is that it has smart app control. The smart app control on this bike includes GPS tracking of the bike and an anti-theft system, which is great, especially if you live in a sketchy area. Plus the bike is UL 2849 certified and UL 2271 certified. This bike also has a removable battery built into the frame right here. You get 2 sets of keys for the battery. All you got to do, stick them in, give it a turn, and right here you've got a little button. Push that button. Make sure you don't just let the battery fall out because there's nothing stopping it. Not too heavy, but it fits perfectly in the bike and it makes the bike look awesome. I honestly love e-bikes that have the battery integrated into the frame here. It's a very sleek design. This is a 48 volt system, so it's not going to be the quickest or the torquiest system or the fastest, but that's all right. And when it comes to the battery on here, like I mentioned, it is 48 volts and it's a 20 amp hour battery. So now let's talk about some of the specs that this bike has to offer. When it comes to the throttle, it has a thumb throttle on the right side. I do personally prefer the twist throttle, but that's all right. A thumb throttle works just as good. It has a 750 watt Bafang rear hub motor, and Bafang is one of the better brands when it comes to these rear hub motors. And you can also ride it for long distances without putting on any pressure. This thing can do 90 miles with pedal assist. You definitely won't be able to reach 90 miles the way that I ride. The brakes on this bike are Tektro hydraulic brakes, and I love to see hydraulic brakes because hydraulic brakes are just so much better than mechanical brakes. There's no squish to them, and hydraulic brakes on an e-bike are a must. I believe it has 150 millimeter rotors on here, and the shifter is your typical 7-speed Shimano shifter. And when it comes to the assembly of this bike, it's very easy. All you gotta do is attach the front handlebars, put the front wheel on, as well as the headlight, front fender if you do get the front fender, rear rack. But now let's talk about the suspension on this bike. It does lack rear suspension and it also doesn't have seat post suspension. So you should know that before purchasing this bike. But it still rides pretty smooth in my opinion. And when we go on our test ride, we'll definitely test out the suspension. But we've got a front fork here, which you can actually adjust right here. It doesn't look like there's any name brand forks on here. You've got the reflectors here on the wheel. You got the reflectors there on the wheel. One of the things that I think is more important to have on an e-bike, and that is the derailleur guard right here. So that way, if you knock your bike over or anything happens or you get bumped there, your derailleur is not going to get damaged. It's a silver chain, and you've also got a single-sided chain guard right up front here, so it's not double-sided, which in my opinion all bikes should have a double-sided chain guard. Not a big deal because I don't really pedal any of my e-bikes. I prefer to ride around in style with a throttle. The fenders you get metal, and the rear light that comes with it is not hardwired, so this light you actually gotta turn on yourself with a little switch right here. Kind of wish it was hardwired so that when you hit the brakes, your brake light comes on. We've got the control system, pretty typical control system. I've seen a few just like this, very easy to use. You got the power button, you've got the plus and the minus, you've got the headlights, and you got the information button. And then you've got the very nice display right here. I personally love this display. Very easy to read. You've got a power level right down here, and you got the speed. Let's tilt this thing up. Let's see what it looks like. So you can see that power level on the bottom, and this thing caps out at 28 miles an hour. But overall, I really like the screen on this e-bike. The bike also just looks super sick in my opinion, and by sick I mean cool. It looks really cool. In case you don't read my lingo. Got their branding right back here, Freedare. You got your branding right here. You can actually also attach a basket to. They've got mounting points for that if you decide you want to do that. The cable management on this bike is very nice. These cables are not going to get in your way whatsoever, and then they're routed right down through here and they go right into the frame. I hate it when wires and cables go down the bottom right here and are just zip tied. So that is a big positive for this bike. I've sat on this bike already, and the seat, it's kind of squishy, but in my honest opinion, you're probably going to want to swap this seat out for something a little more comfortable because it feels like a rock. I'm not going to lie to you guys. This is an honest review. The top view of the bike, it's pretty cool looking, honestly. It looks very chunky and very thick. I don't know if you can tell. The frame is really thick, and so is that front fender. I mean, look at that. This is a beefy bike here. And you also get the locking grips, which I always like to see on a bike. Let's see how that wheel spins. Definitely kicks right up to 29. You get the 26x4 knobby Kenda fat tires. Very good for pretty much any terrain you're going to take this bike out on. But then also, speaking about the tires, right here, this is also a through axle. So you can see that axle is locked in place. That wheel is not going to come off. But I do really like these tires. A reputable brand when it comes to e-bike tires. Plus, another thing I think we should mention is that white line going around the tire. It looks, I don't even know what you'd call it. Is that like a retro look? Either way, it's unique and it looks pretty cool. Now we're going to take a quick look at how this thing looks with me sitting on it. I am 5'11 and a half, but I like to tell people I'm 6 foot tall. And there you guys go. Lowest level on the seat. I can't put both of my feet down flat on the ground, which isn't a big deal. This is probably a bike for a taller person because this seat goes up much higher than this. See, the seat goes up pretty high. I personally would not ever try to ride it this high. So if you're 7 foot or taller, you could probably easily ride and pedal this bike. And there you go. It's a dual headlight, so you got light there, light there. Pretty nice headlight in my opinion. So when it comes to this bike, without the rear suspension and without a seat post suspension on here, it might not be the most comfortable ride, but it has the front suspension, which you can lock, but I don't see why anybody would ever lock their forks. It just doesn't make sense to me. Good amount of travel. Seat's uncomfortable, no rear suspension, no seat post suspension. Not a big deal though, because I rode this here and it's actually a pretty comfortable ride. After all, I have ridden bikes that have no suspension at all, and those are uncomfortable.